There is a lot of irony to being someone who's reaching out to people when you have like rejection sensitivity. Like you're just asking for trouble. Talking to other parents about their kids and being able to be a resource, there's a lot of reward to that. Working from home is the reason I can be successful. So creating our own company that kind of works around where I can be happy was really important.
What advice would you give to other people with ADHD who want to start their own business?
I would say just do it.
Hello, everyone. Today, I have the wonderful privilege of chatting with Kathryn Palmer. After working for years in marketing, Kathryn launched Authentic Public Relations and Marketing in Las Vegas in 2017. Since then, she's worked with Las Vegas's top chefs and local businesses to bring national attention to each brand story. So much so, in fact, that her public relations firm has become one of the region's top firms, and when not eating the amazing food, she spends time with her husband, children, dogs, and leads a neurodiversity affirming Girl Scout troop. So welcome, Kathryn. It's so great to have you here.
It's so nice to be here.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you currently work in neurodiverse affirming spaces such as, having a Girl Scouts troop. Can you tell me a little bit about what that looks like? I was so curious.
So we have a Girl Scout troop and it's an amazing troop, but it's a very big troop because the unfortunate reality is there's not a lot of volunteers really at most nonprofit levels, and the Girl Scouts aren't immune to that. So we have a troop that's kind of by accident become neurodivergent affirming. It started with my kids and then we've added some other kiddos, and with that have been able to establish this really positive group of young women who can feel safe and we can make accommodations. And I remember sitting at one of our Girl Scout kind of service unit meetings and hearing about a little girl who had been kicked out of her troop essentially for being autistic because she had a really hard time at a Girl Scout cookie booth, and, the other parents weren't comfortable. And that really broke my heart, right? Things like scouting and, any of these kind of like positive entrepreneurship based opportunities should be open to everyone. And to me, it was really important that we established ourselves as officially being neurodivergent affirming and a group of people that would be accepting and accommodating and be able to give people that really positive experience, regardless what their skills are and what their diagnoses are. And even if they're just like straight up neurotypical, whatever, we're having a good time.
Can you give me any examples of, when that neurodiversity affirming, what that has looked like in that space?
We do have a couple girls that walk around. Sitting still is hard for me. Mm-hmm. Sitting still is hard for lots of neurodivergent folks. Yeah. So if you need to stand up, great. If you need to go walk over and look at that tree, cool. Like if you need to finish your badge at home because this is not your day, whatever. All of this is fine, right? None of this needs to be, we're not curing cancer. We're just doing Girl Scouts. So however we all get there at the end of the day is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And when did you find out that you had ADHD, and what did that journey look like for you?
So I was a unicorn in this situation for ADHD. I got diagnosed as a teenager, which I know is like an incredible opportunity as a girl, right? My older brother had been diagnosed when he was much younger. So I was diagnosed, and I was one of those girls that was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and maybe I was bipolar, and maybe you're this, and maybe that, X, Y, and Z. So they also added in, I was like that rainbow of all the things. They added in ADHD when I was a teenager. I started trying to take medication, but it really didn't work out for me. And then when I was 37, I was also given an diagnosis of being autistic. So I have all the good stuff, but that kind of removed a lot of the borderline personality and bipolar and things like that, and which appears to be pretty typical with female autism diagnoses, is getting all these other things before we get to the right one.
Yeah. And we hear, a lot. I think there's a growing conversation around the idea of having a dual diagnosis of autism and ADHD. So can you tell me a little bit about how that diagnosis happened and what that meant for you?
So it's clearly something that's running in my family, right? Our daughter was diagnosed autistic, actually another unicorn situation before she was 3, which again, almost never happens for girls. It's generally when they're older and things really start to get tricky for them. So my daughter was diagnosed fairly early. And with that, you kind of put the puzzle pieces together, right? Like, where'd this come from? You're like, oh, whoopsie, that was me. And then you keep putting puzzle
Mm-hmm.
pieces together and you create this
Mm-hmm.
family tree, right? Of like who has what and who gave what to whom and in what capacity. So we did that little deep dive and really started to figure out that all of us kind of had something going on. And with that, I went and sought a diagnosis myself with a practitioner who was not going to be the right fit, and then ultimately found someone who was the right fit. So that took a little bit of digging.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. So, did that change anything for you, that diagnosis?
I think when you get diagnosed with anything in a neurodiversity, right, it gives you the opportunity to give yourself a lot more grace. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really important. At that point, it's not, I don't want to say it's not your fault, but it's not your fault, right? I don't sit still.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my fault. It also kind of keeps me skinny. So that's good. But there's lots of things that, you give yourself grace, you give your other family members grace too. And I think that's been really
Mm-hmm.
important. I had lunch with someone the other day and we were talking about ADHD and thinking back and where she's sitting and maybe her parents had it and really even giving your family some grace about how you were raised or
Mm-hmm.
quirks about your family and things like that. So it can be really healing in my mind.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And, in the middle of these two diagnoses, you also created a really successful business. When did you decide to start your own thing?
So I had worked for a couple different public relations firms here in town and it just wasn't clicking, right? For a million and one reasons. Part of which actually is because they started wanting people to return to the office. My first company was fully remote. And then the second company I was working for was remote, moving back to the office. And that just wasn't going to work for me. It wasn't going to work for them and it wasn't going to work for me. So after leaving there, it gave me the opportunity to really sit down and say, how can I be successful? Working from home is the reason I can be successful. So creating my own space
Mm-hmm.
and creating our own company that kind of works around where I can be happy, successful, and thrive was really
Mm-hmm.
important. And we were able to do that with the help of it's myself and my business partner who started the company back then.
Yeah. You mentioned working at home makes you successful. I know a lot of people will be relating to that. So, can you take me through kind of what you mean by that? Like, what does it look like to work from home for you?
So for me, I mean, I need an outside space. It's important for me to be able to see trees and see nature. And, obviously in Las Vegas, it's 130 degrees out right now, I'm pretty sure. But,
Mm,
at least being able to see outside is really helpful. But, I have a desk, I have a couch, I have another couch, I have dogs, I have lots of different spaces to be able to work. And however my brain is feeling most comfortable in those moments, I can kind of place myself there. And I'm one of those people who can't have both of my feet flat on the ground at any point. So having a lot of different seating options is really important. It's really helpful for me.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I am doing this podcast sitting cross-legged, so
See?
as is normal for me. And yeah, you're totally right. You're totally right. So, what would you say was the most difficult thing about starting your own thing?
I mean, for us in public relations, it's really, we have to put ourselves out there, right? We weren't in a situation where someone was handing us clients or handing us work or telling us what to do. So, as someone who is now diagnosed autistic ADHD, having to go out and pretty much mask your way through a lot of different conversations with a lot of different people to convince them to hire you is pretty daunting.
Yeah.
So that was probably one of my biggest fears. Like we were having lunch every day with people, we were having dinner, we were having drinks. It was a constant round of socializing, which I think anyone in our space knows is a lot. So that was really tough.
100%. Yeah. My next question was how did you manage that?
Fair amount of drinking that helps, and I know there is like a big correlation between neurodivergence and having a drink to make yourself feel more reasonable, more neurotypical, more comfortable in social situations. So the good news is public relations drinking is not frowned upon, but it was a lot of that and just kind of putting ourselves out there. So
Hmm. Did you find that you developed any processes for putting yourself out there? Did you have any, I would say, more positive processes around the idea of like, we talk about rejection sensitivity all the time. And
mm,
I'm sure that there's a lot of rejection sensitivity with what you're doing.
there's a lot of rejection sensitivity with it. And I don't even think I was fully aware of rejection sensitivity when we first were starting this out. So I just wandered around with my feelings for a lot. But we needed to make this work. and it needed to happen one way or another. So we just kind of had to work through it, right? It just had to happen. There wasn't really an
Mhm.
alternative at that point. We had already made the leap. And so, right, wrong, or indifferent, we were doing this. So that, I mean,
Mhm.
when your back's up against the wall, that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
We know that ADHD can feel overwhelming and frustrating, and that's on a good day. And we don't want anyone to have to navigate that alone.
That's why we created the ADHD Academy, where adults with ADHD can meet, join, share stories, and support each other in a judgment-free way. If you want to connect with others who truly understand you and learn research-based strategies to help you feel more in control and build momentum in your life and work, you found the right place.
Together, let's transform your ADHD challenges into strengths. If you'd like to know more, you can click the link below to join us in the ADHD Academy.
Hope to see you there. But I am curious because one of the things we like to talk about when we do these interviews is we like to talk about the strategies that people have gotten. So they might have strategies of sort of delegating parts of the task could be one, maybe taking some parts and delegating it to other people, or maybe, sometimes people talk about the idea of breaking projects down, doing them in pieces, or doing something positive for yourself when you get a negative. Have you ever tried any of those strategies?
Tried most of those strategies. Actually, I am blessed with a business partner that has complementary skills to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, she is not as direct of a communicator. So that's the nicest way I can put that. But I can be a very direct communicator. And so having her to kind of go in there and soften the blow or be able to explain feelings a little bit better and things like that are really helpful. And I would
Mm-hmm.
say that both of us are really good about recognizing, like, sometimes you just need a treat. You need a little snack, you need a little cookie, you need a new outfit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're going to make it, but like, there needs to be some level of reward for all of this. So the good
Yeah.
news is we're both very good at recognizing those things in those moments.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And what would you say? Because you mentioned that your business partner is quite, the opposite from you. So, what would you say is kind of your strength that you're bringing to the space?
I think direct communication is actually really helpful because, as much as that's her strength, that can also be a weakness, right? And as much as direct
Mm-hmm.
communication can be a weakness, it could also be a strength. I'm
Mm-hmm.
much more analytical. I love an Excel spreadsheet, which is not typical
Mm-hmm.
in public relations, to be honest. But, I'm very happy to do a lot of the business stuff that needs to happen to make sure that we have enough money, that we can pay people, that our taxes are covered and things like that. That brings me joy, and it brings me a little bit of comfort in knowing where our money is, knowing where it's going, knowing where we need to
Mm-hmm.
be, knowing what client loads look like, things like that. So there's a lot of strength in some of the things that I can bring to the situation.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you consider to be a neurodiverse strength that you bring to the business? Is that one of them?
I would say hyperfocus is so helpful. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
I joke with our staff, but if I'm getting my hair done and I can't move for
Mm-hmm.
almost 4 hours, like, I'll get 3 weeks worth of work done. Right. And so that
Mm-hmm.
is such a strength to be able to sit down. And if you can get me to sit down for 2 hours, like, we're good for the month. We're all set. Everything's figured out. Everything's budgeted. Everything's everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. So I do
Mm-hmm.
really, really love that. And I've started to really try to be more graceful with that, even with my family when they're in hyperfocus. Because I'm like, oh, well, if you
Mm-hmm.
guys are going to go get everything done, great. Don't let me interrupt you.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is there anything that for you sort of, because different people have different reasons for hyperfocus. Sometimes some people find it frustrating because it will come, at any particular time and it won't necessarily be on work. In other cases, it's based on deadlines. What is your reason for hyperfocus? Do you have one?
I think mine's time based. And I've been reading more now about chrono-working and really just trying to be successful when you can be successful, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really important in our space, right? You can't force it sometimes. And that's, being in public relations, we do a lot of writing. And so
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not in the mood to write, if it's not coming to me, it's not going to happen, right? But if it's going
Mm-hmm.
to happen at 5 in the morning when my brain's like going great, then I'm going to sit down at five
Mm-hmm.
in the morning and get all that stuff done. And
Interesting.
so I do find that really helpful. But giving myself that grace to say, okay, this is when I'm going to be successful, it's been really helpful.
Yeah. That's really interesting. We get a lot of people on here with a lot of strategies and systems. And I have to admit, I'm one of those people as well. I mean, obviously that's what I do. But it sounds like your sort of way of working is it's a lot of freedom. It's a lot of kind of letting yourself kind of go. Maybe this is just me, but it feels like both exciting and also a bit scary because you're sort of letting yourself just do it as it comes. Like, how is that for you?
I mean, it's great for me. We've been doing it for long enough now that it feels pretty natural. I think that's where I wasn't as successful when working for other people, right? Is the
Mm.
expectations are different. The expectations are you're going to be here from X to Y, and then you're going to be working and you're going to be productive during that time, and or you're fired. And so working, being an entrepreneur and being able to make my own schedule to some extent, right? We have employees, we have clients, we have things like that. But that is incredibly helpful for my brain to be able
Mhm.
to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, very cool. So, what does a typical day in the life look like for you?
So I really do like getting up early. I know that's not the most, not everybody loves it, but I do. I love getting up early. If I can get myself to go, work out, I will. And try to get some stuff done in the morning because that is when I'm best, right? I clean out my inbox. We do have two kids, so I get them to wherever it is they need to be and then come home. And generally, again, in the morning is when I'm best. So I'll get as much stuff as I can done then. We do have a lot of meetings, and honestly, the meetings are really helpful. And I know that that sounds counterproductive, but then I can plan my day, and that's ADHD problem
Mhm.
solving, right? That's really where we
Mhm.
are so successful. But I can say, okay, I have from 10 to 11 that I know I can work, so I'm going to work then. Then I'm going to go to this meeting. Then I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to do that, and then oh my gosh, then I'll be right next to Target, so I'm going to go grab this thing that I needed to get, then go do that. I mean, the planning and the logistics are something I actually really enjoy. Having meetings, having some structure without too much structure has been really great. But then I find my kids and, make dinner. And then if I can work again at night, I'll do that as well.
Yeah. Wow. So it's very, very busy, it sounds.
It is. But I think I'm more successful when I have more to do.
Yeah. And it sounds like you really enjoy what you do.
I do.
Yeah. What do you do on the days when you wake up and the going ain't going? Like you're just not, you don't want to do any of it. Does that ever happen to you?
No, it doesn't really. I really I'm very involved at our kids' school. I'm very involved with Girl Scouts. I'm very involved with a lot of outside community stuff. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's important to me to have a lot of different kinds of things to do on a daily basis
Mm-hmm.
to give my brain that opportunity to focus on different things and switch gears and do stuff like that. And it actually is really helpful. But I'm not great at just sitting down and
Yeah.
relaxing as a concept is terrifying to me.
Yeah. That's kind of, yeah, that's interesting. And so, you mentioned that you're doing sort of Girl Scouts and you're doing things with your kids and that kind of thing. I'm really curious. And I think this is something I'm personally curious as well about as a young parent. How do you show up in those spaces where I imagine it's pretty neurotypical often in a way that is authentic to you, but also engaging with those different scenarios?
To be honest, it's not always authentic to me, but it's
Mm-hmm.
for the better. My husband and I talk about it a lot, but if I can be at the kids' school, make their situations more positive, if I can be at Girl Scouts and make my daughter's experience more positive, there is reward the masking, if that makes sense.
Tell me more about that.
I mean, because you are dealing with a lot of different parents. You're dealing with a lot of neurotypical people. You're dealing with a lot of people that if I was full Catherine, we call it full Catherine, but if I was full Catherine, I mean, they would be like, "Ooh, this girl, she's a lot." Right. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember listening to you guys talk about ADHD stigma and things like that. I'm painfully aware of ADHD stigma. I'm painfully aware that
Mm-hmm.
people don't always want to be our friends. Right. But if it's for the good of the kids, we can shut up and color a little bit in our family, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I guess when you're talking about, masking, and we do talk about masking a lot, you're right. Like how does that engage with connecting with people? Do you find that you're masking a lot at work or, where do you feel comfortable being yourself? Because you're working in these quite, public relations is, I imagine, quite intense role in some ways.
It is. But the good news is we do work with a lot of chefs, and a lot of chefs have ADHD.
Nice.
A lot of our clients actually are more than likely, if not officially diagnosed, ADHD. And again, I have the benefit of having a business partner, so we can really match our clients to which one of our personalities they're going to mesh with and we're going to mesh with. So that is,
Mhm.
I would say, part of our success, right, is being able to find the right staff for the right clients. And so at work, it is pretty easy for me to be somewhat myself, which I love. When it comes to the kids' school stuff, it's funny now that this has become such a big movement, right? Undiagnosed girls with ADHD. So it's been more rewarding than when I would have thought at the kids' school, talking to other parents about their kids and being able to be a resource because I'm
Mm.
certainly not shy about my diagnoses. And so
Mm.
being able to help other parents, find support or get an opinion or maybe talk about symptoms and things like that. And there's a lot of reward to that as well. So there's a lot of us out there. I feel like I keep finding
Definitely.
those people, but I'm happy to help those people, right? It's tough. And then also help
Mhm.
those people understand if their kids are getting diagnosed, like maybe you have some stuff going
Have
on
you
too.
considered your family tree?
I was
Yeah.
gonna, what? There's something that was going around that said like every time a kid gets diagnosed, we should also be testing the parents. I'm like, obviously we should, but
Mhm.
getting your kid diagnosed is already unfortunately kind of an act of like heroism at this point because there is so many
Mhm.
stigmas around some of these neurodiversities. So I
Yeah.
mean, then to take it a step further and look at yourself, it's super scary for people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're totally right. I think that, there's research to back that up. I was reading a piece of research a while ago and they were sort of saying that not only is it at a point now where people are saying, okay, if you're getting diagnosed with ADHD, they're looking at both of the parents and going, where is it coming from? Because it probably is coming from somewhere. But also, yeah, being able to be a parent who has ADHD, who learns how to manage their ADHD and shows their child that they're doing that is one of the best things they can do to help their child with their ADHD diagnosis, which is pretty awesome.
But we need everybody to get diagnosed, and that's the
Yeah,
bigger
it's not
problem.
easy. It's not
So
easy. It's not easy to get diagnosed. It's not easy to get
no,
support.
it's definitely it wasn't easy for me. It wasn't easy for our daughter. It wasn't easy for really any of us, right? And it's
Mhm.
shocking how hard it is. And I was at the doctor earlier this week and I said, like, hey, I'm sitting in this chair. I'm like, I'm having a little bit of a hard time sitting in this chair. I don't sit still well. I have ADHD, I'm autistic. She goes, are you actually autistic? Or are you one of those ones that like TikTok? I'm like, girl. But like
Wow.
that's what we're up against, right? I'm
Yeah,
like, well, actually I'm diagnosed. But it sucks to hear a medical professional even question
definitely.
that and then not
Mhm.
recognize how hard it is to get a diagnosis, even as a child, but more so as an adult for any of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it is tricky. And it's interesting you mentioned the autism diagnosis as well, because, that is a growing space where women, I don't want to just say women because I think it's everybody, but like, women are chronically underdiagnosed. And so women are realizing that there might be more to their ADHD than just ADHD. And that becomes a thing of like, oh gosh, another thing. I think a lot of us have had that feeling. I've spoken to a lot of people recently who've sort of gone like, hey, maybe there's more to this than just my ADHD, but I don't want to be that person who's like adding something else because then you have to deal with exactly what you described right there.
You do. I mean, and this is coming from a medical professional. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the part that it's like, ooh, well, no,
Yeah.
TikTok did not diagnose me, but thanks so much. But
Yeah.
it's very hard. And the first person I saw, when I was seeking diagnosis, he did pull out like the tests for little boys. And as
Hmm.
soon as I made eye contact with him, I was like, nope, this is not the guy. This is the guy who's supposed to
Hmm.
be diagnosing adults. And he's already decided that this is not my situation because I can fake
Hmm.
eye contact with him. And that's what girls are up against.
Yeah. It's the masking, like you said, like being able to mask means you can't possibly have the struggles, but that's not, we just know from the research that is not the case. There's so much research now about masking in women and diagnosis in women. Definitely. Definitely. Well, I want to change tack here just a little bit because you mentioned that you've worked with Las Vegas's top chefs, and I am dying because I watched a couple of, I don't know much and I'm not based in Las Vegas, but I have heard tale of your wonderful chefs and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any fun stories about working in that environment?
I do, but I don't. I mean, the chefs that we work with, because they are, when we've worked with a lot of different people that have had various degrees of fame, nationally, internationally, we have actually worked with a lot of people that have been on Top Chef, funny enough, the show. And the kitchen's not really like a very mentally healthy space, right? It's not. There's yelling, there is substance abuse there. And it's funny, you kind of trace it all back. Like, is this all because people aren't diagnosed with the things and getting the support they're supposed to? So they found this kitchen that's a kinship space with other people and they're treating themselves through substance abuse or through, things like that. Yeah, we go deep with these things sometimes.
Yeah. That was not what I was expecting, but yeah, that makes sense.
No, I mean, I do think there is a lot of that happening, right? We have not worked with anyone that's abusing substances, but you hear about it all the time, especially here in Las Vegas. There's a big mental health movement around the kitchen right now, which is awesome. And we're really excited about. But at the same time, I do think it's one of those professions that people kind of gravitate to when they have ADHD or they have, some of these other diagnoses because you're moving around a lot. It's different every day. You are experiencing new things. You're experiencing new sounds. You're experiencing, it can be really fulfilling in a sensories. And I love food, so there's that.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your bio, which I thought was great. What are the kinds of things that you help these chefs with in your role?
Ironically, we do try to help them get organized sometimes.
Oh, really?
I really like helping people get on the right track. Like, okay, these are the meetings that you're going to go to. These are the things you're going to say. This is how this is going to work. You reminded me to remind you that, you have this coming up, X, Y, and Z. Like just trying to get people, and we have a lot of processes in place at our company, very specific standards, SOPs, reporting, things like that help all of our brands, but also help our clients see like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what they've been doing. This is what I'm doing next. Right. And so kind of getting people organized in that respect is really fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. And do you find, you mentioned kind of these processes. So what do they, say somebody comes to you and they're a chef, maybe they're from, Top Chef, they've done something like that. What are they usually looking for from your organization?
A lot of our chefs are really just looking for national recognition, right? Or awards or things like that. And we do work with some pretty outstanding people that deserve all of those things. But it's funny, the spectrum of chefs, there's some who will go and be on a national TV show, but then don't want to talk to anyone in person. They won't, if a reporter comes in, they're like, move. We work with some James Beard award-winning chefs who just won't even come out of the kitchen. Right. They won't come out. They won't talk to people. They'll find an alternate preferred activity to do instead of the things we need them to do. Right. They want this and they know it's important, but I think sometimes it's really hard for people to get there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so what do you tend to do then? Do you have connections with sort of TV shows and different reporters and things, and you sort of bring them, connect the two?
We do. So like I said, we do a lot of writing. So we send out a lot of information about all of these folks and what they're doing and why they deserve all the recognition that they do deserve, right? The things that they're doing. And especially when it comes to, like you said, the culture and mental health space and what are these chefs trying to do to provide a more balanced work environment for their people while still making amazing food. So we do connect with a lot of reporters, a lot of TV shows, and a lot of media about ways we can highlight that and bring this much deserved attention to these chefs.
Yeah. Yeah. So you do a lot of pitching people essentially.
We do.
Yeah. Is it a lot of cold, outreach or?
It can be.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking this is because we've had so many very interesting people on this podcast and a lot of them have talked about doing this kind of work in whatever field they're in, because a lot of us are doing our own thing, running our own business or side business or whatever it is. So I'm very curious to talk to somebody who's in the job of basically reaching out to people.
And it's funny, there is a lot of irony to being someone who's reaching out to people. when you have like rejection sensitivity. Like you're just asking for trouble in that situation, right? You're asking to be rejected on a regular basis. And this is what people pay us to do, which is, I mean, the logic of it is a little bit shocking, but it's for the good of someone else. And we do like to have these conversations. We do like to know what media are interested in, what they're working on, and really bring some of these great things to light. It's important.
Yeah.
And as someone who travels a lot and eats a lot, I want these reporters to feel great so that I can read about their stories in other places and make sure I eat well in other cities too. So it's a little self-serving.
100%. So let's say you're kind of doing, you've got a new chef, you're doing some kind of thing, maybe they're not super well known yet. You mentioned rejection sensitivity. You probably don't have the exact stats, but like, is it sort of a 50% people don't say no, 50% people say yes?
Oh, it's much higher than 50%.
I thought it might be.
Yeah, it's not great. But, we tend to start with our local media, right? The people that are already here, the people that are here in Las Vegas. If the people that are already writing about our city don't know, we need to make them aware. And then we'll go another step, and then go another step until we get to a larger story. But that's the biggest thing is we really want to make sure that our local community is supporting each one of these chefs because this is our backyard. And that's really why we started the company, is to work with little tiny businesses and these chefs that don't have the time, don't have the wherewithal, but deserve the attention. And it is somewhat selfish because it was more so we wanted to make sure we still had really good restaurants to eat at here in Las Vegas, but just making awareness. And whether that be through public relations, we do help with social media as well. And we work with influencers, people like that, really creating comprehensive plans to try to hit as many people as we can.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So what advice would you give to other people with ADHD or neurodiversity who want to start their own business?
I would say just do it. It's so much better this way. It really is. Like I've worked for a lot of people. There's been some parts that I really enjoyed and I've learned a lot. My mom was very much a corporate executive. So, I always thought that would be what I would do because, you just kind of go along with it.
Oh, yeah.
But there's so much more freedom in being an entrepreneur and being able to make your own schedule, being able to make your own plans, being able to make your own rituals, being able to do all that stuff and build yourself a situation in which you'll be comfortable and which you'll be successful.
Yeah.
And I would also say if you can get a business partner, like doing it yourself is tough. It really is. But if you can find someone like-minded, it does make a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think having a business partner is so helpful. And, it's funny as well because, you didn't mention it, but you also get to hang out with other people who are neurodiverse, but maybe more than you would in a workplace because, you've gone and found chefs who are in that space as well. And I've done that with this business. I feel like we gravitate and we have the ability to gravitate towards other people who think like us, which can be really fulfilling as well.
But I do think that sometimes can be a double-edged sword, which is kind of funny, right? That if we continue to surround ourselves with neurodivergent people, it's almost like when we go back out into like the neurotypical world, we're like, oh crap, I forgot about everything else. I forgot that people don't know how to work around me. I forgot that they, and so it can be a little jarring. So trying to kind of manage those two things together is tough. I like my bubble.
Yeah, I like my bubble too. I'm sort of like, yeah, you're right, but I like my bubble. I'm staying here. But definitely. Okay. Well, I'm just going to ask you some of the ADHD lab questions we ask everyone. Tell us about one professional achievement that you're most proud of.
I really am most proud of what we've built for our company here in Las Vegas. I thought we would just be working with little tiny businesses and little tiny chefs, but we've actually had the opportunity to work with James Beard Award winners. We just had 50 Best here in Las Vegas with people that, were visited by media from across the globe. We work with some pretty extraordinary people. And we also work with a couple of nonprofits and things like that. But we've been able to build this really thoughtful business. And I'm really proud.
That's awesome. That's very, very cool. And on the other side, is there a professional failure that embarrasses you? How did you deal with that?
At my very last job, I got fired. And of course I'm embarrassed. Of course I'm embarrassed about that. But I also think I wasn't understanding the social pieces of it and where I needed to politic appropriately. And, now knowing who I am to some extent, right? Every day is a little different, but, I am able to give myself a lot more grace now, with that information and knowing it wasn't just me. There were people that were misunderstanding me as much as I was misunderstanding them. And I'm not willing to take all of the blame anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate you sharing that. And my last question is, if you had an ADHD life motto, what would it be?
We have a family motto, and it sounds awful, but stay with me. Our family motto is I don't have to do anything. And it's probably because I think we have some PDA profile going on in this family. But I mean, I do think ADHD in women can come with a lot of people pleasing, right? That goes along with masking, that kind of goes along with all of these other things. And so, I mean, I think you can tell I put myself into a lot of volunteer situations and a lot of kids situations and all that other stuff. My husband is much smarter than I am and does not put himself in all those situations. You don't have to say yes to all this stuff. I don't have to do any of this stuff. If something's going to make me uncomfortable, if something's going to ruin my day, right? If something's going to ruin my routine or what's going to make me happy, I don't have to do it. None of this stuff is really life or death comparatively. And the problem is now our kids have kind of turned that on us. So I don't have to do anything. But
why did we make this a family motto and not a parent's
motto? We are setting ourselves up for success. So but that's really our thing. It's like you have to figure out how to balance.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really great when you do have that kind of, like you said, that focus on people pleasing. It can be very freeing to be like, well, I don't have to. Like, what do I want to? Because that does lead to the next question, which is, okay, well, what do I want to do?
And I don't know if first of all, as women, but second of all, as neurodivergent women who have been masking, who have been trying to fit in places we don't, what's going to make us happy? And that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, Kathryn. Please tell everyone, where can they find you?
They can find us at authenticpublicrelations.com, and I have some poorly managed Instagrams, but we won't worry about that. So, and they can always come visit us in Las Vegas, and I will go eat with anyone every time.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kai.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to reach out or connect with us, you can leave us a message at admin@unconventionalorganization.com.
You can also find out more about our ADHD coaching organization, read our free articles, or sign up to our online courses at unconventionalorganization.com. That's organization with a Z or an S. They both will get you there.
If you'd like to learn more about what we discussed here today, or you want to read the transcript, you can find that at our show notes page at unconventionalorganization.com.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and think someone else might find the strategies and stories helpful, the best thing you can do is share episodes using the share button in the podcast player, or leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or your podcast player of choice, letting them know why you've benefited from this podcast.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back in the ADHD lab next week.